The hour, Republican Senator Rand Paul challenging the president's position on ISIS. Senator Rand Paul is my guest now from Washington, D.C., and welcome back here to America's Newsroom. Time.com, you write this just yesterday, quote, "Today, there are more terrorist groups than there were before 9/11, most notably ISIS. After all the sacrifice in Afghanistan and Iraq, why do we find ourselves in a more dangerous world? And why, after 6 years, does President Obama lack a strategy to deal with threats like ISIS?" Answer your own questions. How'd we get here?
I think that chaos breeds terrorism. So when you have a lack of order, once we wiped out the order or the regime in Libya, we had chaos. So now we have several dozen jihadist groups. In fact, there are jihadists swimming in our embassy swimming pool as we speak. So Libya is much more chaotic since we got rid of Gaddafi. Now, Gaddafi wasn't a great leader, obviously, and had many human rights violations. He was not a Democrat. However, there was stability there. Now that he's gone, the jihadists are run amok. It's the same in Syria. The policy of President Obama is to degrade Assad, but Assad is an opponent to radical jihadism. So radical jihadism is now flourishing in Syria, and ISIS really has grown stronger because we helped to create a safe haven for them, or President Obama did, rather.
Well, Democrats and a lot of Republicans would argue that you're a reluctant warrior. You were against intervention in Libya. You were against intervention in Syria. So what's different now about ISIS?
Well, I think the interesting thing is for 5 years I've been saying, hey, guys, I'm not an isolationist, and they keep calling me that, and then they're somehow surprised when they find out that I'm not. But I really say that intervention should be judicious, it should be wise, it really should be with the consent of Congress, because that's what the Constitution called for, but it also should be and go to the heart of people who are our enemies. Radical Islam attacked us on 9/11. They are our enemies, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to protect ourselves not only at home but around the world where our interests are involved. However, toppling dictators around the world has actually created more radical Islam and allowed them to flourish. And so what I would say is we've made a mistake where we intervened, but I've never said that we should never intervene.
Okay, now there are a lot of tentacles on the story, as you know, and you just outlined them. And frankly, you need a flow chart to follow a lot of this stuff. But to be clear, you say airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq is something you favor. You're saying that airstrikes now in Syria against ISIS militants is something you favor, correct?
Well, what I have said is that the president, if he were a leader, would come to Congress and call for a joint session of Congress, and he would ask for permission. That's the way the Constitution works. He would ask for permission to wage war against these people who are waging war against us. And the war would carry where it would carry. Whether or not it's in Syria or not, there are a lot of questions that would have to be answered that I don't necessarily have the answer for. Are you willing to fly over airspace without the permission of Assad? I frankly think perhaps Assad might actually give permission to fly over airspace to attack his enemies. So these are questions I don't have answers for because I don't have the intelligence.
But you clearly have an answer for this question. If the vote came to you, would you vote yes or no?
Yes, I would vote yes, and I would do it in a heartbeat, because I think that radical Islam, ISIS, is a threat to the United States. They're a threat to our embassies, to our consulates, to our journalists. But ultimately, I would also emphasize that the end to this war, the final resolution of this war, will not come from the West. It will come from civilized Islam, which is the vast majority of Islam, but civilized Islam needs to rise up and wipe out these barbaric elements that I think are not true custodians of the religion. It will not end until that happens. And so instead of Saudi Arabia fomenting chaos in Syria, Saudi Arabia needs to step up and say, we're going to be part of the solution, and that is wiping out the radical elements that don't represent true Islam. But I can't do that. The West can't do that. Ultimately, that's going to have to come from Islam itself. But in the meantime, America needs to protect ourselves from terrorism.
You mentioned it a moment ago. You also write in Time.com, jihadists today swim in our embassy pool. We saw that in Tripoli last week. Syria has become a jihadist wonderland. Yet here is Hillary Clinton. And there's a strong possibility you're going to seek the nomination on the Republican side. And Hillary Clinton would be a person you would campaign against ultimately if you were to be successful in that nomination hunt. Here she was in Nevada talking about what she thinks is the greatest danger to us today, and it's not Islamic terrorism. Listen.
The most consequential, urgent, sweeping collection of challenges we face. Sea levels are rising, ice caps are melting, storms, droughts, and wildfires are wreaking havoc.
What's that all about?
Well, I don't think we really want a commander-in-chief who's battling climate change instead of terrorism. She also has been out there saying that ISIS is not a threat. And so not a threat to America. Those, I think, were her exact words. So, no, I think this goes to this ultimate. I believe a couple of months ago there was a quote from her saying ISIS was not a threat to America. But what I would say is that for her to be out there saying that the biggest threat to our safety and to our well-being is climate change, I think goes to the heart of the matter of whether or not she has the wisdom to lead the country, which I think it's obvious that she doesn't.
Senator Rand Paul from Washington, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.